And welcome back to We Are the People. This is your host, Jason Preston, with my beautiful wife. How are you, baby?
It's harder to answer that question every time you ask me recently, but...
Just know it's coming. It shouldn't be a surprise anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm here in good company, so that's all that matters.
Yeah. Really, today, this is a show that I've been, I don't know if I want to say excited about all week, because we've had some pretty powerful shows that are going to be released with over the next few weeks from victims. You know, we've talked so much about the Hamblin victim statements, and those have tore us apart. You know, all of us, if we listened and watched in horror about what's gone on in our backyard. But the question is this more than just the Hamblin girls they're going through, horrific things? Is there more in this state than just 3 girls and 15 alleged perpetrators? And you guys been following us since the lawsuit, and we've told you one of the things we've committed to do is to listen to victims as frequently as possible, several times a week, as much as honestly we can handle, because it is very heavy, and it's been an experience that has really, I would say, given us both a lot of depth, to take this on, and it's been heavy. The reason I was excited about this one is, and I don't know why this story in this particular, I mean, of course you know why. You just listen to it, but I've listened to so many, but for some reason the guest we have on today just tore me apart as I listened to her story and as she walked me through, what she's been through. And so I'm really honored to have her in our studio today. I'm going to skip all the stuff. Thank you guys for sponsoring this. I just don't want to weigh this with that or lighten this with that, but I want to thank you guys for making this possible, all of you who do that. And before I turn the time over to Alexia, I want to read something by Gordon B. Hinckley that I think really hits how we should all be feeling, because I think today's story, well, let me start by reading this. This is Save the Children in October 1994. He says, "Surely God, our eternal Father, must weep when he sees the abuse that is heaped upon his little ones. For I am satisfied they hold a special place in his grand design. That place was confirmed when his Son, the Savior of the world, walked the dusty roads of Palestine. Quote, and they brought to him also infants that he would touch them. But when his disciples saw it, they rebuked them. But Jesus said, Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of God. Verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child shall in no wise enter therein." And then he goes on to say, how great is our responsibility, how serious the responsibility of Christian people and men and women of goodwill everywhere to reach out and ease the plight of suffering children, to lift them from the rut of despair in which they walk. And the reason I want to read that is because I believe that. And I believe those principles, is why, that is why I believe you are watching this. And I think the question we need to ask today as we hear a story that's going to rip your heart apart, and it's ripped me apart, is are we doing that as individuals? I don't care if you're Christians, but especially as Christians. And secondly, as a church who writes these things, are we acting in harmony with what we say? And I hope those words will sit on your heart as you listen to today's show, and particularly as we come to as we wrap it up. I hope if we feel that we have failed in that mission, we can start to think about what it truly means to be Christians, and not just as individuals. Well, first and foremost as individuals, because that's all we are. That's where we have power. But also as members of any church, particularly the church that bears his name, start to reconsider how we treat the most vulnerable. Alexia, would you mind introducing our guest?
Yes, of course, and thank you for that, Jason. As we've said on some of our past Shadows of Power shows, we just want to highlight the sensitive nature of this specific show and this program. It's going to contain pretty graphic discussions around sexual abuse and trafficking, and for that reason, viewer discretion is strongly advised. We will put further disclaimers down in the comments below, but definitely not the time to be listening with children around. If you want to keep them in a different room, or maybe at an appropriate time, have the right discussions with your family about these types of topics, because part of the reason that these things don't come to light is because we're afraid to talk about it. We need to learn to talk about it amongst our family at the appropriate time, with our neighbors, with our communities, and bring these horrific things to light, despite how much we want to turn away from them. So with that, I'm absolutely honored to introduce to you a incredibly brave, incredibly eloquent survivor of some horrific abuse. This story spans not just Utah, but also our neighboring state of Nevada. When Marybeth first reached out to us, she wrote us a really beautiful email, which I'll read later on in the program, and it just captured us completely. And after further vetting, we thought it would be appropriate to bring her on and share her story with you for informational purposes and light a fire in you, hopefully the same way it lit in us. So with that said, Marybeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for having me. Oh, yeah. I've been a little bit nervous today. As I told you, this is the first time I've told my story to more than about one person at a time. Yeah. I started telling it in 2018 when I decided to finally go public with the information. And I was trying to decide how to start today. I know timeline-wise I could have started, but I think really one thing that I say to anyone I'm telling my story to is I do not fit the criteria of a normal abuse victim. And because of that, it skated by. No one looks at a blonde, blue-eyed 5-year-old who's in a home with 2 parents that were both educated. I had 5 siblings. I was the 5th of 6. My dad was a school teacher and my mom an elementary school principal. We were active in the LDS church. I was blessed, baptized, and left, all in the same church building, pretty much the same ward the entire time. And so I just was not the typical child that you tend to think of with trafficking. I continued to go to school. I lived at home. I was not a runaway. My perpetrator, who we'll talk about later, would pick me up and take me to a hotel. He would often give me something to drink, so I was more compliant. Depending on the night, depending on the excuse he would use to get me out of my home. Sometimes it was 1 man, sometimes it was 3 to 4. It would happen 2 to 3 days a week, and I would go home and go to school, and nobody knew what was going on.
So Marybeth, your story starts somewhere around age 5?
Correct.
In Nevada, in
Yes.
Las Vegas?
Yes. So I grew up in the same home my entire childhood until I left for BYU. So I was in the ward, and yeah, I was 5 years old. The church had just changed from primary being on Thursday to actually the 3-hour block. It was about 1980, 81, when I was first taken out of my primary class and raped in the bathroom of the church building. We would call that bathroom today a family bathroom. In my church, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it was called a scout bathroom. And it was a church that was built by the members in the 1950s, so it is not a standard LDS building as we tend to think of them. And it was by the scout room. It had a shower. It was where the scouts came after camping. They would pick up their camping supplies and actually had a shower and bathroom. And it was back behind, hidden behind the stage. And everybody knew it was there, but it just wasn't used very often. And so he would walk me from primary on one side of the building, past classrooms, bishop's offices, through the lobby of the church, and through the gymnasium, and to the bathroom. The first time I was 5, he was a friend of my parents, so I wasn't uncomfortable with him, but I remember asking him where we were going and why we were going there, and he continued to tell me that my parents wanted to see me. He took me in that bathroom and locked the door. Still to this day, when I am in an LDS building, I can hear the sound of that door. And all of the doors in LDS buildings kind of sound the same. They have that air pressure. I still can have severe anxiety from listening to doors. I heard it so many times during the 2 to 3 years that he would rape me. It was 2 to 3 times a month. I obviously don't remember every incident. I remember the first time he had me lay down on the cold tile and took my nylons. I was wearing tights. And he removed my shoes and my tights and put his hand over my mouth, but I wasn't quiet enough. So he put my tights in my mouth so that I would be quiet. And he laid on top of me, raped me completely with penetration. While doing so, he whispered in my ear that this was what God wants for 5-year-olds, that all girls did this at the age of 5. He sang a little primary song to me.
Oh my gosh.
And completed raping me. It would continue very much like that, the same thing, over the course of the next 2 years, fairly regularly. He would ask for me during a sharing time or in class itself and walk me back to that bathroom.
How did you cope with this at the age of 5? How did you internalize what was happening to you?
I didn't know what was happening to me. I didn't know what any of it was. I knew it hurt unbelievably, especially that first time. I didn't have anybody to ask. And he told me that this is what happens to little girls. So in my head, it was kind of like, maybe this is what God wants me to do. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody I hate this and I don't want to do this because everybody else is doing it. Like, this is what we do.
Were you threatened to be quiet or anything like that? Or how did he keep you from?
Not that first time. But later, definitely. It became, he had certain punishments and knew how to hurt me. He learned pretty quickly by doing different things what I would respond to and what I wouldn't respond to.
What do you mean?
His favorite thing to do when I would not behave was to flick me. I was not wearing glasses at the time. To flick me under the eye in the most sensitive place. And then he would hold my neck so that I couldn't protect myself. And he thought it was funny to watch me squirm because I couldn't stop the pain. And usually that meant, I'm watching you. I know what you're doing. I'm going to punish you more later. And as we get further into my story and I get a little bit older, he would count the number of times he did it. And that would represent, I'm going to punish you more as you get out of this. So I learned rather quickly just not to talk. He was a prominent member of the ward. Everybody knew who he was. He was a prominent member of the community. Friends with my parents. He would come over for a study group, Bible study at the time. He was a part of my life. And so it was really hard to kind of go, I don't know what's happening. It wasn't until obviously much later that I even had terminology for what was going on. He would walk me back sometimes. Most of the time he would tell me to get my tights on and walk back myself. He wouldn't walk me back. Take care of yourself. And he would go to class like it was nothing. He used his tie quite often. He would tie it around my neck. I learned pretty quickly. Church buildings, for those of you that have been in older church buildings, they had holes in the ceiling. And I could count holes as he was raping me. And I learned how many exact holes were in that bathroom over and over and over again. It allowed me to kind of disappear from what was happening to me. And I learned the articles of faith when I was getting ready for baptism. I would start as soon as he started raping me, and I would just say them over and over and over again until he was done. So I learned ways to protect myself, I think, to step away from what was happening to me. I also, and it takes a little bit of family history, I also was easily groomed. And the reason why, besides him just being in my ward my entire life, as well as a friend of my parents, was I was the fifth of 6 children. I followed 3 boys. And my house was chaos, just plain chaos. And as much as my parents tried to do what was right, and they did great at getting us to church and having 6 children in a row on, the 3rd row, we had a chaotic household. And at times it felt like 8 people living in the same house, but not really family. We were more roommates. Growing up, I watched shows like Seventh Heaven, and I was like, that's not our family. Like, I had no idea what was going on with my brothers and sisters. Actually,
it makes you feel better. Most families are not like those TV families.
Yes, of course. But I remember when I told my brother, one of my brothers, about my abuse, he was not surprised at all. People I've told have not been surprised. It actually really clarifies to them, like, oh, you make sense now.
When we talked last time, you mentioned that there was your mother sent an email or a letter to your grandma.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather saying, is it normal for a 6-year-old? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I actually, they're on the drive, so you have copies of
them.
Okay,
so we'll put it on the screen so they'll look at it while you're sharing this.
Yeah, so obviously back in the day, 1981, 1982, there weren't any emails. And my maternal grandfather lived in Logan. My mother moved down to Las Vegas and met my father there. She moved down to teach school and met my dad. She would write letters weekly, and then my grandfather would write back. And my grandfather did a wonderful thing, and that was he put all the letters together before he passed. And I happened to have them all to scan, and he would put a copy of one of his children's letters and then his response in a children's letter. And so I've been able to go through and read. And of course, they were mostly, as she had children, mostly little paragraphs about each child. I found some in 81 and 82 where she spoke about taking me to the doctor because I had UTIs again. And she emphasized that we have taken her so many times to get UTIs. We're going this week. She's going to get on antibiotics again, but we really need to figure out what is going on with this girl. Like, why is she so susceptible to what is happening? And the thing I think that in 2024, we look at that and go, your mom was an educator. How did she not think, it was 1981 and 1982. Nobody believes that was happening. It wasn't in the wheelhouse.
I mean, I don't believe people are believing this happening now.
Yeah, exactly. Let alone a parent who's dropping you off in primary. I think every parent should feel like I can drop my kid off for 2 hours and they're going to be protected, right? I'm going to come at the end of the day. I had brothers in primary, not my class, but I was not alone. So I think it was just outside the wheelhouse, but I refused to go to the bathroom. Like, I would not go at my house. I would hold it as long as possible because I was terrified of bathrooms. And this is where I was raped and hurt, and he held my head in the toilet sometimes.
What?
It was torture. And so the thought of going to a bathroom, even though I knew the ones at home were safe, no, I wanted nothing to do with that. And that would probably cause UTIs as well, of course.
So this goes on. Just, I mean, again, I just trying to picture a little 6-7-year-old girl this happening to, and I've got girls. So it's not hard to imagine, you know what I mean? How, you know, how just the horrificness of this. 8 years old, you finally get the courage to talk to your bishop.
Yeah, it was actually about 2 weeks before I turned 8, and it was my baptism interview. So it was actually not all that courageous. I was going because I was getting baptized. But it was courageous in the sense that I did finally decide I needed to tell somebody that something was not right. I just felt it. It hurt. My parents had never talked to me about this is what happens to little girls. I didn't know what was going on. But the other thing was, Jason, that I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get baptized. I was afraid that he would see me as guilty, that somehow I wanted this. So a part of it was confessing. Like, I want you to know that this wasn't my idea. I didn't want this to happen to me. And that's how I started the conversation, actually. But I have this memory of sitting across the table from him, and parents at the time, my parents were out in the parking lot. My feet didn't even hit the floor. That's how small I was in one of those big chairs. And I remember waving my feet back and forth. I was so nervous about telling him. And I told him what was happening, when it had started, the name of the perp. And I was using terminology that kind of, I think, shocked him a little bit. So he knew, he said he believed me. And he said, I will take care of it. I will tell your parents for you. I will get the help that you need. Let's just stay quiet about it right now.
And at this point, it's been going on now 3 years with this one particular perpetrator.
Yes.
And during the 3 years, no primary teacher, no kid your age. I know your family's checked out, but no one's saying anything like, that's weird.
A couple of things going back to how close this ward was. We were in downtown Las Vegas. My dad actually moved into Las Vegas in 1929 when he was 3 years old. So we were long time on the same street. Everybody knew each other. My grandparents lived next door. My aunt and uncle lived across the street. Like, everybody knew the Long family. But it was also a very old neighborhood. There were very few people my age. But when I went, when I decided to go and talk to people and the press and get an attorney and all of those things in 2018, I actually reached out to everyone my age. Two people remember me leaving, that somebody would come in very often. They said, I don't know if I could identify who it was. Like, they were little, right? We were all 5 and 6 year olds, but they remember me being absent a lot. So that reassured me, I also wanted to know if anyone else was being abused. That was a big question for me. Like, why me? Why aren't there's 4 little girls my age, and 3 boys that we kind of went through everything together. As far as anyone will admit, I was the only one in that group anyway, that age group. So I have connected with all of them. As far as teachers are concerned, I think the ward being so close really worked against me. Everybody knew who he was. Him coming in and saying, again, I don't know what he said every time, but him coming in and saying, hey, her parents want her, or I've been asked to walk her. I don't even think that raised an alarm. Like, I don't know. I've gone back and looked at some of the teachers I had during that time, especially when I was 5, 6, and 7. Unfortunately, has passed away. But some coincidences that are kind of odd. Her husband happens to be associated with the hotel that I was later trafficked in. So I have found some connections, not saying that's why, but I have found some connections in that way that kind of link her to, well, maybe she looked the other way.
So let's go back to the bishop. He tells you he'll take care of it. He tells you to talk to your mom and dad and says, let's not worry about this.
Yeah, it wasn't not worry about it. He was appropriately worried about it. Let's not talk about it. Let me go to your parents, because I had the impression that I'm going to take care of it, which means talking to your perpetrator. And so let's not talk about it until I have that opportunity to. Yeah. Now, my grandfather passed away the same week that I happened to meet with Bishop. And so we left to go to Logan. I was not being baptized till the first week in December. I was born at the end of November. And he, as far as I know, he never told anybody. He never made a phone call. He never told my parents. The only one I absolutely know he told was my perpetrator.
How do you tell us what happened?
Again, I left town for the funeral, came back, was baptized and confirmed. The next time he took me to the bathroom, he told me that he knew I had been bad, that he knew I had told. And it was the first time that he raped me anally and used a plunger in the bathroom to do the same.
What?
Yeah, sodomized. I would find out through the next little while that he liked pain with his sexual acts. And so inflicting pain in my eyes, as we talked about, or using bottles as I got a little bit older, those types of things was not out of the norm for him. But that first Sunday, he told me that it was because I had told, and told me I would never tell again, right? I promised I would never tell again. And not only that, not only because I didn't want to get hurt again, but nothing had happened. What's the point of going and telling if nothing's going to happen? I mean, this was a man that's supposed to be the father of my ward. He had children. He had grandchildren. And I asked you this too, and we'll get back to the story in a minute, but how do these men who have children and grandchildren know this is going on and just not do anything? You see me every Sunday.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why we're doing this. I don't know.
Like mentally, it's just like, and I told him, because the bishop's office I walk by, I said, he walks me by your office. When we walk by, why don't you have your door open? And I doubt I said it that clearly since I was just little, but you can sit in your chair and watch us walk by. Then you would know, right? You would know if it was true or not. He had his door closed as long as I could remember. Wow.
He didn't want to know.
He didn't want to know. He just didn't want to.
Was your perp married?
He was.
Did you have any type of relationship with his wife?
I did. She was quiet. I didn't know her very well. They had grown children pretty much. He was older. So I know his youngest kind of well. But by and large, it was him. He would come to most activities. He was really involved in politics, so even though you're not allowed to, he would kind of pass out the cards as he was coming, and he'd come to ward activities and pass out cards, and you're voting for me, right?
Yeah, sounds like a politician.
Yeah,
Sounds like our Utah politicians.
exactly. So, he was just a big part of my life.
So up until 8, everything is pretty much isolated to inside the ward on those, what was it, Sundays?
Yes, very much so. Just him in the bathroom. He told me when I was about 8.5, going on 9, that I was now outside his age preference. He preferred 4 to 7-year-olds. I was getting a little bit too old, and so on a few occasions he invited another man in. But I think it became problematic because the more people you're bringing into this during church, the more likelihood you're going to get caught. So it slowed down. He wasn't as interested in me. And then I was 9 going on 10 the first time I was taken to the Blue Angel on Fremont Street. And taken into a room. He walked me in, and within about 10 or 15 minutes, a man I did not know, kind of recognized, but didn't know, came in. They talked for quite a while, forced me to undress. When I refused to, because I didn't know this man, that's when Jack started flicking my eye. And I just knew that meant I can't punish you now, but wait. And so I was obedient. He left me with him. I screamed and screamed for him to not leave me. I remember getting off the bed and actually grabbing his legs and begging him not to leave me there. At least he was a known. I mean, what happened with him was awful, but he was known to me. This man I didn't know, and I was now naked in a bed in a hotel room, and he was leaving me. And so, as he was leaving, the man handed him some money and asked my name. And he told him that I had no name. And he pointed at the room number on the door and said, just call her that. What followed was many years of losing my name. That's how they asked for me. It was the room I was in pretty much every time I went. I think part of it was not wanting them to know my name, but I think a part of it was not wanting to give me an identity to have anyone relate to me or want to not abuse me because all of a sudden I'm a person. I very much feel like I was a warm sex doll, that they could come in and do what they wanted. They had no communication with me. They wouldn't talk to me. Once in a while, there were a few you kind of get to know because they were return. I had one man who liked to pray in my ear while he was raping me. I had another that liked primary songs he would sing to me. So I started to know regulars that did things, but by and large, the men that came did not talk to me. I was in bed. They would come in, do what they wanted to do, and then would leave.
Were you drugged during this time, or?
I was drugged most of the first couple of years, as far as I know. I was given orange juice or milk on the way, and it tasted really nasty. It was not every time, but as I got a little bit older, I noticed that if I was going to be with a lot of men that night, or if it was a VIP who needed me to be very compliant, that I would be given. But after a couple of years, I really stopped fighting. There wasn't a point to me fighting. No one was going to stop it. That had been shown to me. Anytime I fought and they reported it to my perpetrator, I was being punished horridly. So it wasn't worth it to me to fight anymore. And you just become, like I said, a warm sex doll.
Did you ever see any other children or girls in that motel?
Yeah, unfortunately. It was a very well-organized sex ring. The first time I was taken there, it was just him and the guy that came. And so I thought for a while, it was just me. But as I got a little bit older, this is going to sound so stupid because can God be found at such a place? I really felt inspired to collect as much information and watch as much as I could. Watch cars that are coming and going. Write things down. Are you seeing anyone you recognize? So if somebody canceled or my perpetrator wouldn't be back in time to pick me up, so I'd have a little bit of extra time. The motel was very trashy. The doors opened right up to the parking lot. And I do have pictures of those as well, the Blue Angel.
Yeah, all right, so let's show a picture here on the screen. We'll show that. And then tell us about the ledger. You have it here, correct?
I do, yeah.
I
grabbed it, of course. Keep it in a safety deposit box. So when I was 11, I noticed that there was a new piece of paper that was taped to the nightstand next to my bed. And it had all of these terminologies that I didn't understand and prices next to them. It was laminated. It was a permanent feature whenever I was there. And I decided I needed to look up what everything meant. And so I took a piece of stationery from the motel, and that is my 11-year-old cursive handwriting. I wrote down everything on the sheet with the intention of going home and looking them up in a dictionary. I hid it under the mattress until I was done for the night, and then in my underwear on the way home. It wasn't until I had gotten it out a few days later to look it up in my parents' dictionary that I noticed that there was a ledger on the back with initials and appears to be what men owed. As far as I can tell, it's been hard because my perpetrator is dead. We've looked at some of his writing at UNLV and other places. That appears to be his handwriting, as much as we can have a handwriting expert figure that out.
So, Alexia, why don't you take a look at that? Why don't you read some things that stick out to you? Just, again,
Well, the first
9-year-old little girl.
Well, the first thing that sticks out to me is actually agency prices, which tells me it's an enterprise.
Yeah, I believe so.
So this isn't just a one-off sick man trafficking one woman. This is a enterprise. And this is what year? This is 80s, 90s?
So I would have been 11 in 85, so 84, 85.
85. So in 1985, I don't know how to scale that to pricing for present day. Just coming in and being with you was off the bat $35.
Just $35.
It's disgusting.
Then there's all kinds of add-ons, which, I mean, I don't want to completely scare our viewers in with all of the horrific things. We'll put them up on the screen, but I did have a question. How do you know that you're done for the night? You know, are we talking about a handful of?
No, I want to read this. This is disgusting. Golden shower. Okay, choking, chains. This is a 9-year-old girl.
11. 11
No,
or
9. She was 9.
Not that that makes it any better.
Yeah. Electric play.
Did you get electrocuted?
No, there were some that never happened to me. This was just everything on the list that I guess potentially could happen.
For whatever sick fetish.
Exactly.
Right.
Chained up. I won't read. You can see these. I can't even say some of these things.
A lot of them weren't in the dictionary either.
I would say.
Yeah, I think I still am not sure what all of them are. Yeah, the price list was there next to the lamp so they could see it. And then I'm assuming by the totals that is not just 1 week, that it's been over time. I would say that's probably a couple of weeks worth of items.
So, yeah.
It says condom required or $50. $50 what?
You don't read it. You can't read it, what it says after they can see on the screen. Okay, John, $55. Glenn C., $105. I mean, you go down the list. MD, Mark, $200. And what is this? KH, 100 tithe. RH, 110 tithe. What is that?
Well, obviously,
I'm sure you've thought a lot about this.
Yeah, a lot about it.
And the fact that you saved this.
After 40 years.
Yeah, exactly, almost.
Hold on, before we get to the tithe, can you please share about this story with the doll, please?
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about the tithe, and I want to talk about the nobody standing up for you, the allowance of this to happen. But please, let's first talk about the doll, because that was, when you told me that, I mean, literally broke my heart.
I was given a doll at the age of 2 for Christmas, probably like most little girls. And I named her Sarah Beth. She was from the Sears catalog, one that I had circled and asked Santa for. And she still sits on my bed today. She's a little worse for wear. I grew up with 3 brothers, and she was, I don't know, tied to fans and beaten against the wall. She has permanent birthmarks, the color of the wall in my bedroom. So she's been a little wear and tear. But one of the things that my perpetrator allowed me the first few times I went was my doll, that I was allowed to take her. I was not allowed to have her in bed with me, but I could put her on the floor or on the chair in the room. I did not want that to happen after the first few times because there were quite a few men who liked to masturbate in her hair, to tease me, or to make me obedient. And so I stopped bringing her. Even though she was comforting to me, even though I still hold on to her today, I just could not allow it to happen. So this is
Can
Sarah
you show
Beth.
us the doll?
Her hair's a little worse for wear. This is Sarah Beth. She is from the Sears catalog. My sister actually is the oldest in the family. She was so grateful to have a little sister after 3 boys. She actually made the dress, and it has a little hat and booties. So yeah, the hair was something, it's obviously fake hair, but it was something that the men could obviously cover their penis in and masturbate in. And I just stopped taking her because of that. But as we'll finish the story in a little while, it actually came to haunt them because DNA stays a long time in doll hair, especially when you refuse to wash your doll. So it came back to bite them in some ways. So, yeah, that's Sarah Beth.
Wow. So
this is you were 9 years old.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just can't not.
So
How do you not relate as a parent?
I'm just trying to understand a day or a week in your life during this time of trafficking. What does a normal week look like? You're going to school, you're still having this, quote, normal family, however that looks.
I was. I mean, my parents, we had what at the time would have looked like a very good Mormon family. And we were. We did everything we were supposed to do. The Long family, again, was very well known. So maybe what happened in the house, it was definitely when you leave the house, you represent the Long family. So be on your best behavior. And we went to church every Sunday. We had family home evening. My mom did not work until my younger brother was going to school. So she was a stay-at-home mom for quite a while. And scripture study, we tried the best we could. We tried in the morning and in the evening, and family prayer. And my mom served as stake primary president for a number of years. We were very active. And so that was a big part of my life.
While all this was going on.
While all of this was going on.
He's picking her up after young women's meetings
when I got a little bit older, he would pick me up after young women meetings. I write quite extensively in my journal that I also included some in about, I withdrew. I'm shy anyway, and being abused and not wanting to tell my secret just made me withdraw even more. And so I remember multiple times my mom telling me as I got a little bit older, this was not when I was 9, obviously, there's no curfew. I'm just so grateful you're going out with friends. She was just grateful I wasn't sitting at home anymore, just doing something. And so just being able to get out of the house, I don't think she ever questioned that. And I started lying as I got a little bit older. I'm going to so-and-so's house for a sleepover. Again, small ward. There were only 4 girls. We were all best friends in the ward. So sleepover was not out of the question.
But you were going to the motel?
I'd go to the motel.
He was picking her up, yeah.
He would arrange for me to pick up me up.
So I want to shift gears here because I think there's and I apologize, and I don't apologize to you guys for sharing this because this is happening. And the reason this hurts me is this is a story that we are hearing day in and day out as we talk to survivors. And there's some very common threads you're about to hear about, like what happened when she talked to her bishop, because this could have been stopped many, many, many times. At several times, this is a little girl who was basically, murdered as a child. I don't think people can you destroy a child, that little girl never comes back.
I like saying that when people ask because, rape next to murder. And it's like, no, he killed me. He killed who I was supposed to be. And she can never be back. I can never, regardless of how much therapy I take and how well I'm doing and how many years pass, I can never get that little girl back. Part of healing is accepting that and accepting that it's okay that I took a different path, that my life led me in a way that maybe I wouldn't have foreseen, but that I can say goodbye to that little girl so that I can heal. But he murdered her. There's no doubt about it. And it feels the same. Obviously, I'm still alive, and that is a blessing. But when I think about what I could have been and how I went into myself and disappeared and what it was like to be nameless, it broke me. It broke me.
Beth, what would it have meant to you? And I want to go into the time after time you went for help and were turned away and turned down, because this is the second part that I want to focus on, is the tragedy of those who could have done something but did nothing.
Yeah, so I made a list today about the people I told before the age of 18, and it was actually more extensive than I remember. So first was my bishop at my baptism interview. It would take a little while for me to tell again. I was about 14 or 15 when my mom finally said, I'm really, really worried about you. You're depressed. I was talking about killing myself. I could not get myself out of this depression. She took me to my bishop first, a new bishop at the time. Typical bishop response: get out of it, make yourself smile, wear a rubber band around your wrist. Anytime you're sad, flick it. Put a picture of Jesus up in your bathroom, anything to help me feel better. My mom
You
actually...
told him you were being raped.
Not yet.
Okay.
No, this would come. So Mom finally referred me to... Mom got permission from him for me to go to LDS Social Services. It's now been renamed to LDS Family Services. I saw a therapist there for almost 2 years. The very first time I met her, we were 10 minutes into why I was there. She said, "Who's raping you?" No way in hell was I telling this woman. There's just no way. It took 6-7 months. I denied it. 6 or 7 months in, I did tell her a little bit. And she told me that she would have to report it to the bishop, my bishop. And that is how my bishop as a teenager found out, was actually through my therapist. However, even though she worked for LDS Family Services, she was a mandated reporter, licensed in the state of Nevada, never reported my abuse. My bishop, who she called 3 times to say, "Why aren't you talking to this girl?" never talked to me about it and never reported it. I had multiple conversations with him over the course of those 2 years, birthday interviews. I was called as, Laurel leader, those types of things when I would meet with him. Never brought it up. That was it for me trying to get the church to do anything.
Are you familiar with Kirk and McConkie?
A little bit too well. Now, there was no abuse hotline at the time. That, I believe, came 93, 94, which is when I graduated high school. So there was not at the time. Now, my bishop, when I was 7 or 8 years old, looked very much like you do right now when I told him. Very emotional. His eyes were wet. Could it have been that he told somebody up the line, a stake president, who shut him down? Very possible. I would not know that. At some point, whether it was him or whether it was a stake president or a regional, how far it went up, I do not know. Someone put the kibosh on my story, even to my parents. The thing that gets me is that even if you don't believe me, I knew words that I should not have known at the age of 7. Tell my parents. Even if it's just, your little girl knows some language she shouldn't know. What is happening? Tell my parents. Never happened. Never happened. I wrote about it. I have 3 school essays that I wrote in high school about my abuse. I talked to a teacher who I became very close to. I talked to him about it. He was very worried, fairly. We went together to talk to a high school counselor. She listened intently. She did not report, and he did not report. None of the English teachers I wrote to about it reported. It was failure after failure after failure. I don't know if it was somebody else is taking care of it. It could have been stopped, not only for me, but there were dozens of little girls younger than I was. I was getting on the older age that had the same sheet I did next to their bed. And I would watch some nights, 4, 5, 6 years old, going into rooms with men they did not know. They would be screaming. I did not know any of them, did not recognize any of them, but they were obviously being hurt. I think about telling the bishop at 7. I had already been abused for 2 years, but he could have stopped 11 years of abuse. 11 years. I never would have been taken to the Blue Angel. I never would have been sold. Maybe somebody would have gone to the Blue Angel Motel and stopped it from happening to other little girls. One phone call, one conversation with my parents.
So you came to BYU, which got you out of it.
Got me out of it.
You filed a police report. Tell us about that.
I did not. Well,
Sorry.
okay. No, it's okay. A little back. I did. I left, stayed in the dorms, figured it was over. But my freshman year, there were 3 times that I recognized men who had come to find me and silence me. So all 3 times I reported to the BYU police. One of them actually ended up in what the Daily Universe called at the time, police beat, about being grabbed in the library, and he showed himself to me behind the stacks. So I became familiar with the police that first year, for sure.
Wait, the policeman did that to you?
No. They wrote
Okay.
about it.
Okay, got you.
Yeah. They wrote. That was the one incident, because it was in the library, I think is why they covered it in their police beat. So it was actually in the paper. My name.
And you have this. This is in one of the documents.
Mm-hmm.
You put that on the screen too then. Okay.
Yeah. And lots of times I don't know if it's a blessing or not. I'm one of the people who did not forget my abuse. I remembered it. And especially at BYU, and during high school and BYU, I was pretty open about it. Like, I was telling people, not how bad it was necessarily, but I wrote an article, letter to the editor for the BYU paper that was also published, where I specifically said, I'm an abused child. Like, I did everything I was supposed to do. I did everything anyone can do to get the help that I needed to make it stop. And no one ever reported it. No one ever said anything. I actually won an award for, I joined the journalism class in high school. I enjoy writing. And wrote about it. It made its way into the paper with my name removed. And I actually won an award for my writing. No report. Nothing happened.
But you got a trophy.
But I got a little trophy that still sits on my bookcase. Because it was great. It was something that, it was personal. Which means the award was from the Review Journal, which is the Las Vegas newspaper, which means it was read outside of my high school, and I was awarded it by going to a luncheon with the newspaper, and no report. Nothing ever happened. It was constant. I guess I just think so many times how often, whether it was at 15 when I was told a therapist, or at 7, or even as a freshman at BYU, how many times I said, help me.
And no one. You even went to Senator
Harry Reid.
Harry Reid.
That was when I was grown up.
Okay. It's so important. Tell us about that.
It was when I decided to become, go out in public and start telling my story. Harry Reid was actually a member of my ward for quite a while before my time. But he would come, we were an old ward. All the older women, and especially widows and widowers, really liked Harry Reid. They felt like they needed a Mormon in Congress. So about every 6 years he would
Mormons
show
in
up.
Congress are real impressive.
I know. No, my favorite person. And especially because he would come to the ward for one Sunday every 6 years when he was getting reelected, shake all the little elderly ladies' hands and say, remember to vote for me because you need a Mormon in Congress. And it just frustrated my parents and me and, everything. So he actually was shown the ledger. Everyone that I remember being abused by has died. And he was kind of the last of the elderly group that I thought, even if he wasn't involved, which I do not claim that, and I have no reason to believe he was, he might know what was going on. Maybe he's a few months away from his deathbed. It was long after. I mean, this was just a few years ago. Maybe he would be willing to at least say, yes, I knew something was going on in that ward or in that stake. I think I told you that as soon as the conference was done, we received notification that evening that the first phone call was to the church to make sure they knew that I was there trying to get information.
And what was the response of the church?
I don't.
But nothing.
Well,
So bottom line is you told them and then nothing.
Oh, nothing happened. No.
But even before this, so this was in what, 2021 or so with Harry Reid that this happened?
2019, I think.
So just before this in 2018, you actually had hired an attorney to actually go public with this.
Yes, so that was the plan. I wanted to tell people my story, but more importantly, I wanted some accountability for what happened. I have always said I do not hold them accountable for the age of 5 to 7. Every group of people are going to have bad apples, and my abuser was a bad apple. But as soon as I told, at the age of 7, they became co-conspirators.
Yes. Do you have any questions? I want to bring up
I was
the
just
media.
gonna.
No, keep going.
Yeah, so I was just going to finish going. Yes, I hired an attorney. He is still my attorney of record. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations in Nevada has long passed. And because I did not forget my abuse, Nevada has one of those, if it's within 10 years that you've remembered it. But there's so much evidence that I didn't forget it. There would be no way to even lie about it. I was consistent in my journals, consistently told people. So, I couldn't sue, couldn't do anything with civil or criminal. As far as that's concerned, my perps are dead, that we know about. I also came forward because there were other little girls there. And I don't know their name, I don't know their story, but there were other little girls there. And I want to be a second witness for them. I don't care. Jack is in the ground. The church building where I went to church has been torn down for asbestos. The Blue Angel Motel has been torn down on Fremont Street because it was prostitute haven. I am the last that remains from my abuse.
Ironically, there's still a Blue Angel Motel sign and statue where
Yes,
that is.
because
today.
it is famous. Yeah, it's a landmark. So they actually removed it from the top of the building and put it on a kind of crossroads because people had a fit when it was removed. She was an angel she was a weather vane was how it started. So she was built and then I prayed to her a lot. Please save me. If you're an angel, please save me. I named her. We would have to go through the front gates, and you could see her really well. And just praying in my head, tonight's the night, please save me. And, of course, she never did. But she was very significant to Las Vegas. So when the motel came down, they put her in a museum for a little while. I actually went through the museum, saw her. They kind of redid her, cleaned her up. I asked them there, do you have any record of what the stationery looked like? And they said, there's no way you're ever going to find stationery for the Blue Angel Motel. So when I was able to show them a picture of this, they just were flabbergasted that I had kept it for so long.
Wow. There's another part of your story that needs to be told. There's so much of your story that needs to be told, but I think there's this part that especially needs to be told in Utah. You had a news station that was going to pick up your story so many times. You had a chance for justice, a chance to wake people up, and people had a chance to do something for you. This is the one that really just devastated me. Will you tell us what happened?
Sure. In 2019, a reporter at ABC came to my home and filmed me talking about the same things we're talking about. It was going to be 3 short clips on the evening news. We had timed it so that it would be right as parents were back from vacation, kind of the end of the summer. And she interviewed, and I asked her if she would be asking the church for a comment. And she said, yes, we'll be doing that a couple days before. So I was ready. I was kind of mentally, okay, my story's really going public. It's going to be on ABC. I received signal messages and a phone call from her, as well as emails, saying that the general manager had been called over by the church after she had made a phone call asking for comment. The church had called him and asked him to come over and told him I was a fraud and not to run the story. And he was a stake president at the time. He wanted nothing to do with me after that. That story was killed. Part of me not fighting it was all of a sudden he and the reporter, which means he told the reporter, knew things about me that I had only confessed to bishops and stake presidents here in Utah, which means at some point they approached my bishop and stake president, received confessions, and said they would release them if this went public. I was not there, did not hear the conversation. This comes from the reporter herself.
She told you in a text, email, phone call?
I believe it was a signal message originally. About 2 years later, when I decided to go report my abuse to actually the police in Las Vegas, I reached out to her and said, look, I hear things all over the place. You heard it like from the general manager himself, right? What were you told? And so she emailed me back. So I do have it in email about exactly what she knew, what she was told, what the church threatened to do. I didn't want anything to do with that.
And you have a record of that? Mm-hmm. And that's in the files?
I think so. If not, I can easily get it for you.
We'll put that on the screen for you guys.
Yeah, so it never aired. She has said many times, I still have, the file. If you ever want, I still have the video. If you ever want to make a documentary, do anything like that, you can come and pick it up. But I have quite a few people who have taped me, so I've never needed it, but I've always been grateful for her. She told me, even in those initial signals, and also that she believed me, that she knew it was true. She believed this. She just couldn't fight the church. And that has been a recurring theme as I've gone to Associated Press. I went to Fox. I have written many people who come and say they pull our advertising money.
The church would.
Yeah, so they will not cover it. Once in a while, you find some really nice person who is willing to fight that fight. But I reached out to 2 AP reporters, one in Nevada, one in Utah. They were interested in my story, wanted to write about it. When they approached their managers, those types of things, anything about airing on going to a newspaper, it's always the church pulls advertising. We can't run it. So it's been a consistent over and over and over again for me.
As we wrap up, because you said you've shared some things with me that stuck with me. What has this experience done to your relationship with God?
A few different things. Obviously, as I've grown up, it's changed over time. There's a lot of people who, when they're abused, we tend to think they go to alcohol, they go to drinking. I went the exact opposite. I went to perfection. I had to be perfect. I believed if I was perfect, God would save me. That someone would come that would stop my abuse. Somebody would walk into the bathroom. Somebody would see us walking down the hall and stop it or ask a question. That's all they needed to do was ask a question. I remember even as a little girl feeling not real, that there was an inner me that I couldn't share with anybody who was in pain and depressed and didn't want to be alive anymore and didn't know how to stop this and felt so unworthy all the time. And then there was this girl who went to church and girls' camp and all of these things that you're supposed to do. And I never felt like a whole person. When I started telling my friends about this, that I grew up with in the state and in high school, all of them knew something was going on. All of them knew I was hurting. All of them knew I was depressed, that something was not right. I've cried with a few of those friends as they've said, we should have asked questions. One thing I think I told you was, in all the times he walked me from one side of that church to the other side of that church, through the lobby where other wards were coming and going, and never once did someone stop and ask a question. Not one time. He was holding my hand. He was not my parent. Everybody knew who he was, and everybody knew I did not belong to him. One question could have changed everything. I get asked a lot, where were my parents? And I wanted to make sure that that's answered. And the answer is, I was a little girl, and I don't know. They did not sexually abuse me. They had a lot on their shoulders. They had a full family. My dad was a school teacher. My mom stayed home. We didn't have a lot of money. I think that's one reason I was easily groomed, was because I just wanted attention, and he gave it to me. I just wanted someone to love me, and he picked up on that very quickly. My parents have both passed away. I did not ever tell them. because of that, they cannot defend themselves. So I will say that if they had known, they would have done something. I don't know what, except that my mom was an elementary school teacher. She loved little kids. And I just wanted to add that so no one walks away thinking her parents sold her. I think they were ignorant. I think they lived in a time when it was a little bit more, oh, sure, you can go to so-and-so's house and sleep over. Or, I would call and say, hey, I'm going to be late coming home from Young Women's. Sometimes after school, I would actually walk to the Blue Angel. Jack told me that I had become a part of them because he no longer had to ask me to come. By the time I was 14 or 15, I was walking there on my way home from school. I could lie like the best of them to get out of my house. I just did not want to face the consequences of me not doing that. So the journey has been very long, really hard, lots of therapy. I've pretty much been in therapy since I was 15, 16 years old. I've gone through a lot that did talk therapy, didn't do me much good. It helped me survive. It helped me get through the next day. But until I found a trauma therapist, and they do exist, a PTSD therapist that knew how to work with someone who works with polygamy, who works with trafficking, they do exist. That's when I really started to heal and to get my name back and get my identity back and who I wanted to be. And that's only come recently, in the past 5 or 6 years, that I decided to write about my experience. And the title of my book is I Have a Name. I took it back, and proud to say it. Because for a long time I was room number 46. And I'm not her anymore. And yeah.
Let's see. I have one more question. Do you have a question before?
No, I just have some thoughts.
It's been a very painful experience for Alex and I, just, stepping into your life and the lives of so many others. And one of the things that just, you start to look around at the people around you, and if I look around close enough at my own family and the people close to me, I know I start to see how rampant this is in our society. And I think one of the things that, allows it to become so rampant is this mentality we have in Utah. It's the reason I think we have so much corruption in the state, politically, is this idea that's been indoctrinated. I don't know. It's been permeated through the media, through the culture, that all is well in Zion, that there's no problems. This type of stuff happens. People, this stuff's happening in South America. This stuff's happening, in other places. Our mission has been to wake people up to what's happening in their own backyard, and the reality of this type of filth is the foundation of this entire state. And you hear but you hear. So my last question for you is something for you to share with the audience, for those that are listening who care, because there's many, many people who are starting to wake up, who do care, and that is what we are committed to doing, is waking people up and shifting the culture in this state that will not tolerate this anymore. So what message would you have for the good people of Utah who maybe weren't aware that this stuff is going on?
I think the biggest thing is it happens. It happens to middle class, little white girls that go to church. I went to church. I watched my abuser ride proverbial ladder up the line, got calling after calling after calling. By the time I got to BYU and I started telling bishops not to stop the abuse, but as a part of my story as to why I was struggling with the church, why I was having such a hard time being active and not being so depressed all the time, how often it was, let's not tell anybody. It just makes people uncomfortable. Let's not talk about it. One thing that in 2018 that set me on the now is the time to go public was meeting with a brand new stake president. Brand new. I wrote to him and said, the bishop and I are not seeing eye to eye. Please don't refer me back to him. I need to talk to you. And told him about my abuse, and he was all gung-ho. I'm going to work with your therapist and all this. And as soon as I was willing to give a name, and as soon as he called the abuse hotline, which he told me he was going to do, he said the word abuse, and I have to call Curtin McConkie. Of course, he calls it the abuse hotline, but it's Curtin McConkie. He never talked to me about abuse again. Wanted nothing to do with it. It is drop it, don't talk about it, don't entertain it. I would try to engage the conversation. This is really, I'm having a hard time being active just because of this conflict of God and what the church didn't do for me and all of these emotions that I have regarding church. And it doesn't want anything to do with that whatsoever. As soon as he made that phone call, he was out. That was really when I said, this has to stop. I think I told you, and this is, I think if I had anything to say, is that in the Book of Mormon, there is a story of Nephi killing Laban. And he's told by the Spirit that it's okay to kill him, even though it's against the commandments, because it's for the greater good. We need to get the plates and we need to get them to the world. And I've thought about that many times. Am I the child they're willing to sacrifice so that the church can go forward? Am I and other victims I've met the ones they're willing to put on the sacrificial altar because I'm only one? And it's better to risk 1 or 5 or 10 than 16 million and 50,000 missionaries. If this got out, what about the rock rolling down the mountain? We're the sacrifice. And I can't keep going on. It's got to stop. And whether that starts with training people, don't tell your bishop. Why are we telling our bishops? He's a postman that's called for 5 years. He's got a full-time job, very little training. Please tell a teacher. I wish someone had told me that. Tell your parents if they're not involved. We've got to get the church out of that equation because they're just going to continue to deny it. They're just going to continue to say, it's not us. We're not the problem. They hide behind the priest penitent. My perpetrator was not the penitent. I was the one that reported it. There is no confidentiality if the abused child is reporting it. It is if the perpetrator is confessing. You hear a lot about that. A lot of people online, like, oh, they're hiding behind this priest penitent. No, it was illegal for the bishop to not call CPS. I wasn't confessing. We need to get that out of our heads, that what is happening when a child tells a bishop and he does nothing is illegal. Even in the state of Utah, definitely in the state of Nevada. I'm really lucky, I guess, if such a thing can be said, that when I decided to report, I was able to drive 6 hours south and get out of Utah. I had heard horror stories. It's been 40 years. They're not going to care. Your perpetrator is dead. I was treated with utmost respect. I was able to list names that they wrote down out loud. They called later and said, we want to interview you. We have a cold case detective. I sat in his office for 5.5 hours as he interviewed me over and over and over again. And I said the same thing to him, that is the reason I'm speaking today. There is nothing anyone can do with the statute of limitations. I want to be the second witness. I want to be the one who stands behind and testifies that it's true, to help those that still can receive justice.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Alexia.
Thank you, Marybeth. That was incredibly difficult to listen to, but important. And whether you, viewers, listeners at home, choose to believe it, we just ask that you look at it. Really, really look at it. As uncomfortable as it is. It's one thing to hear about child trafficking. It's another thing to just look at the gruesome graphic details behind what that looks like to a 5-year-old girl. It's one thing to hear the stories from the Hamblin girls about SRA and ritual abuse. I'd understand that murder and sacrifice, the alleged murder and sacrifice in those victim statements are evil, but you can see the evil that lingers in the story that Marybeth shared with us today. And if it's okay, I just wanted to share a snippet from your own writing.
Yeah, I do have one thing I wanted to close with, and that'll be my closing, so you can snip. I started wearing a hummingbird around my neck. And I have a gift for both of you of a hummingbird. I enjoy watching them. They're the smallest bird. And they're called hummingbirds because if you're lucky, you can hear them. They hum. But when a group of them are together, they're called a tune because everyone can hear them. And if we don't show up on Saturday, if we don't start talking and gathering, then we are one. But if we all come together, then we become a group that creates a tune. That's a noise that can't be ignored. And I took mine off today because I would play with it when I was nervous. But I've worn it every day to remind myself to be a voice, to be a part of a tune instead of just my own hum. Because we're so much better and we're so much louder when we're united.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Maybe I'll save some of your writing for a separate clip because it was really powerful.
Yeah, you can put yours before mine.
Oh no,
They're
that
fancy.
that was beautiful. So I'll close.
Go ahead and read it.
Go
Alexia.
ahead.
and
Then
read
we'll
it.
have a record. of
Okay,
it.
this is why. I mean, the whole thing was riveting, but I'll just read from the end. This can't continue. Sexual abuse, ritual abuse, trafficking, the church covering it up and making victims doubt themselves at their own reality. They were equally my abuser, co-conspirators. They knew it was happening, and they did nothing. I'm tired of silence. It has become deafening. No survivor of child abuse and no advocate should ever fear discipline from the church. Such a threat is abusive and barbaric in its tactics. It has been made clear to me that speaking out and demanding answers as to why the church failed me might cost me everything. I can afford it. I know that however bad things may end up for me, they can never be worse than what I experienced as a child when I begged for help and the church failed to listen. I have spent nearly my entire lifetime smothering my voice. Silence is a thief, is a time thief, and has stolen too much of my time. 43 years since I've spoken up. 17 bishops. That's how much time and energy I've wasted accepting blame and shame for what happened to me, apologizing for what my abuser did, feeling guilty and worthless because everyone I told failed me. But my story in my lifetime isn't over yet. I start again, but this time with a voice that is steady, loud and clear. There is so much life ahead and so much purpose. My abuser murdered me at the age of 5. He took everything from me. He killed who I was born to be. I never can get that little girl back. No therapy can ever restore what was taken. That is devastating to a victim. Like murder, what the abusers took can never be restored. It wasn't until I accepted and mourned for that life path that should have been that I could have found the power, find the person that I am meant to be. And I'll just close with this. When I asked you earlier about that blue angel, you said you prayed to her and she never listened. But sitting here with us today, I actually beg to differ because she did save you. She saved you and preserved you long enough to sit here and share your story at a time that I think people are ready to listen to it. And while many might have turned on you when you needed them most, you're still here today. And maybe we can still find a little justice in that. Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, it's been an interesting journey for Alexi and I with this stuff. Someone brought us the initial stuff with the Hamlin girl statements and over a year ago, year and a half, 2 years ago. And, you know, what do? Ignore it? And so we, you know, you have to speak up. You know, our lane has always been political, but what do you do? What do we do? You know, when you have these stories, when you know this is going on, when there's injustice, you know, I mean, first, you know, it's whether it's the governor, whether it's your congressman, whether it's your senator, whether it's, you know, I don't like that this is, the church is involved with this. I don't like that. I hate that. I don't know where to go with that. But what am I going to do? Turn a blind eye and not listen to you because it's my church?
And you're just as guilty as they are.
And, you know, and I know great people in the church. Some of the most people I look up to the most in this world are members of the church and people who have shaped my life, and I'll always be thankful for them. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at Utah, and we're 9th in the nation for rape. When you look at Utah, and we have a 3% conviction rate.
On rape.
When you look at Utah, and we're passing legislation not to go after these criminals, not to protect the innocent, but when we're passing legislation to lessen the fines, lessen the penalties on trafficking, what the hell is going on? So why are we doing this? I mean, because what are we going to do? What are we supposed to sit and just get on TikTok and look up fashion videos or look up sport, turn on the Super Bowl? When you've got people like this whose lives are being wrecked right underneath your nose? This will film air after we have our rally Saturday. And those of you who show up tomorrow, God bless you guys. Because I will tell you, there's a reason these people are reaching out to us right now. It's because people like you are starting to say, you know what? This isn't okay. You know what? What's going on with the justice system in this state isn't okay. What's going on with Kirk and McConkie isn't okay. Children matter, like what Gordon B. Hinckley said. Do we believe it? Do we believe it? We're not going to let this die. We have a list of survivors we will be bringing on. And we are going to ask you to start listening, start standing, start showing up at court dates, start letting our justice system know that we, the people, will not sit by and allow these atrocities to happen to our children. Because I can promise you this. This evil is touching all of us, whether you know it or not. It is close to your home. And if we sit by and let this dragon sit and fester because it's ugly, because it has implications, because I don't know how to handle that, because I don't want to mess up my faith. I don't want to it's just too much to tangle with. I can promise you that dragon will burn down this town. And I will tell you, when the second coming comes, when the Lord brings his wrath and it will start at his house, it is because of this. And I do not believe you and I were sent to sit by on the sidelines and allow these children to suffer. I don't care. You think I care about a lawsuit? When you have people like this and people we're talking to every single day going through this? And I know we're not alone. And I want to thank you guys for standing up with us, standing up for these victims. And I'm going to encourage you to share this content, to comment, to talk to your neighbors, to wake people up, and to show up when there's court dates, to let this state and our leaders know that we see what's going on and we're not okay with it. Because if we're sitting around expecting justice to come from those who we expect to be our shepherds and our police and our law enforcement, the abuse will continue. So, Marybeth, God bless you.
Thank you.
And I hope and pray that we and the people who watch this can do justice by you. So, to those of you, I know I'm sorry, it's been heavy. It's been heavy, and it's going to get heavier. But until we, the people, start waking up, nothing's going to change. And so I want to thank my beautiful wife. She pays a very heavy price to fight this fight. And, I couldn't do this without her. And it's not me, it's us. I'm thankful for her willing to stick with and fight through and go through the burden and the weight that she carries with this. But anyways, you guys, thank you all for your support, all the donations, all this, the comments, all the, standing up, all the showing up. I believe this is God's fight, and I believe God is calling out his army to stand and start standing up for right, to start standing against the darkness. And the darkness is here. It is real. This state is out of control. But God is stirring up his army, and that army is you. And you were called to stand for truth, to stand for justice, to stand for the innocent, like what President Hinckley said. But I sure hope we can not just talk those words, but we can actually live it and be true Christians and be men who don't put up with this garbage. So thank you guys for all your support. Thank you for caring. Thank you for sharing. Let's build that army and let's start protecting and rescuing these innocent victims. God bless you guys. While this song is being played and we have this moment of silence, I'd like to invite those who have spoken and any of you who feel called to come stand up at the front right here along with me.
You are not hidden. It's never never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. For you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear